Hi everyone, my name's Robyn Brown. Welcome to my garden. Today I'm going to show you how to compost your organic waste in a compost cone similar to this one. Mine is a special demonstration compost cone with a clear front, and I'm going to show you how we put those layers in. Now the purpose of this cone is to try and process the waste a little faster than what would happen out in the garden normally, and to do that we must get oxygen in. So we need to use one of these things called a compost spiral. Some people just what we call set and forget. It will break down, but it will take a little longer, whereas this thing turning around and pulling the materials up towards you puts a lot of air into the compost bin. Now the materials that we need to use are things that typically you're going to find around home. So most people are going to have food waste from their kitchen, and we determine this one as mostly a nitrogen base. Now what I've done with this display is put nitrogen based products on the left and carbon dominated products on the other way around for you, on the other side of the bin, so that you can see that really we should be putting a similar amount into the bin. I use an ice cream container as my guide, but you can use any container. So if your container happens to be one like this one, if you are adding that amount of food scraps to your compost bin, it's a nitrogen base. As a general rule of thumb, in my compost bin I tend to add another container full of a carbon-based matter. And so the things that we have on the right-hand side there, shredded paper, I have lots of from my office, straw from my stables, and endless leaves. Now it can be gum leaves, it can be old deciduous leaves, and I've also got old carbon matter from my vegetable garden, like the old corn that I've pulled up. So what we would do is we put, each day you'd come out with your container. So I'm going to throw in first of all my food waste into the bottom of my bin. It doesn't have to cover the whole layer, but what I do know as a rule of thumb, because I've put one layer of food scraps in, I'm going to put one layer of carbon in. Now it's really important to have that carbon next to your compost bin, and later I'm going to show you what I've done at my house is that I have bins next to my compost cone, so I'm just going to throw that in. And you would keep doing that as much. You don't have to have everything ready. This is not like building a bay. You put in what you have at the time. So that's all I have at this time. You can spread it out a little bit with your compost spiral if you want to, but you might only have a small amount at the end of the day. But what you need to do is make sure that the compost always stays moist. Compost should feel like it's cool. So I've got some nice compost in this container here, and I might get my nice camera person to zoom in. When you have a look at the finished product, it's quite dark, and if you touched it, it's quite cool. It almost feels like if I squeezed it, I could get water out of it, but I don't. But it certainly holds together. That's how compost should be. Now, in a cone like this one, there are no holes, so it should stay quite moist as long as the food that you're putting in there is wet, or the greens that we've got down here in front of the compost cone are wet as well. If it's not wet and it's looking quite dull and dry, you're going to have to get your watering can occasionally and give it a bit of a sprinkle. And people say, how do you know? Well, the brown leaves and the carbon matter dry out quite quickly. They need to be kept moist, and you will see that. Now when I've put my layers of whatever I'm bringing out, so I've put my food scraps, or if I've pulled out some vegetable scraps, and I'll just throw a few in here now. I've got some old geranium plants there, but they can go in. And I've got some old arrowroot plants, and they can go in as well. Now, to keep the moisture in as well as the lid, I always find a piece of cardboard to put down and pat down on it, and I keep that damp as well.
Yeah.
And what that's doing is that's keeping the light off the microbes, it's keeping the air off the microbes, all those things they don't like. Now, to be double sure, because summer in Western Australia is punishing, and you sometimes see videos from the eastern states that'll have compost bins with holes all the way around. They don't work here in Perth because the hot air just extracts the moisture from this bin. So you've got to give it every help you can, and I usually put down each time a couple of bags over the top as well. And again, that keeps the moisture in. And you shouldn't have any problems. And we'll just put the lid back on and seal it off, and then that will be fine for the next time. So I'm going to show you in the next little video how to use that spiral when you've got a compost bin that's really firing. I was just showing you here first off how we set it up. But it really is simple, but it does take a bit of practice. It must be kept moist but not wet. And thanks for watching. Hi again everyone. I like to put my compost cones near hungry food trees like this lemon tree. I also have one near my passion fruit and some near my bananas. It's a good idea because what happens is the nutrients leach out and the tree can hook in and take what they need. You'll also notice next to this compost cone I've got a small bin that I keep full with a carbon source. So I've got some gum leaves and I've got shredded paper. Whatever I've got on hand stays in there so that when I come out to the bin, which I'm about to open, I will have ready access to my carbon source. As remember that you should have roughly an equal amount. The only time that you'll have to use slightly more carbon is if you're putting something that's very wet. So if you've got a half a dozen cucumbers that have turned to liquid, or if you've got a pot of soup that's gone rancid, you would probably need to put 3 to 4 times of containers of carbon to balance it. As remember that you have too much nitrogen, if it's too wet, it will make it too nitrogenous and it'll start smelling like citrus. So if you have a look inside my compost bin, this one's nearly full, and normally I'd say to people wait till they get to the top, but in this instance I need some compost. So I am actually going to empty this bin. So I'll need to take off my my bags, and as you can see there, underneath my bags I have my sheets of cardboard, which is still quite damp. I've lost my compost spiral, so it's a bit hard to flick the compost spiral through that. I will just push those to the side. That's quite hot in there. I can see lots of small little creatures running around. Some cockroaches ran off. Now, not all of that's composted down, but that doesn't matter. I know when I pull this compost cone off that a third of it at the bottom is going to be beautiful and dark, like that sample that I showed you before. The top half you could bury as well, or if you're one of those people that really likes to have it perfect, then you just put it back in the bin and we'll restart. So what I'm going to do now is to actually lift that bin, and then I'm going to relocate it, and we're going to start again. I'm still putting it next to my lemon tree because I want the tree to have a little bit of nutrition. Try and get it sitting nice and flat so that my chicks don't dig, because they love the worms. And now you'll notice that if my cameraman can zoom in on my compost cake, we've got the third at the bottom that's beautiful and dark. We've got the third in the middle that's in a transition stage. You can still see a few things breaking down, and the third at the top, which is still completely unbroken. But we have little creatures running through it, and we'll even have some worms in here as well. Underneath some, it's quite warm in there, so the worms might have disappeared towards the bottom. We'll see if we can find a few. Oh, they've all escaped. It is very hot. Hot day, and it's quite warm in there. And I'd say they've gone quite a long way down to get away from the heat. So what we're going to do now is get a fork, and I'm going to fork this top half and put it in the compost cone to start again. So I'm going to keep these pieces of cardboard. They'll be good for the top of the next one. And shovel that in. And that's what you use to start off the next one. It's got lots of microbes in it, and they will activate and really start working on that, breaking down all that organic matter. Pretty easy. Now you also see with that kind of depth that it's absolutely impossible to put your spiral to the bottom each time to keep mixing up and adding air. You only do about 15 to 30 centimetres at a time, because you've put air down the bottom and that's where all your creatures are, and as you come to the top you need the air where the fresh organic matter is. And you would keep, I'm going to, after this video's finished, I'll neaten that off, and then I'll bring my wheelbarrow, and I've got all that beautiful compost at the bottom, which I'm going to show you how to use in the garden in the next clip. So we've made all our wonderful compost, and I've got some here in my bag. I'm about to restore one of my raised garden beds. As you can see, I use a whole lot of baths, and I've made most of them into wicking beds and self-watering. There's no need to replace all of your soil when your summer garden's finished, or winter. In this case I had corn in here. I'm now going to replenish the soil by digging a trench and putting, a trench is only about 10 centimetres deep max, and I'm going to sprinkle compost along the bottom of that trench, and then we're going to cover it all up. Now the microbes, the invisible creatures in this compost, are very sensitive to light, and they will die very quickly if you just decide to use it as mulch. If you don't like digging, put it on the top and cover the compost with wood chips or something like that. And you can see I've got some worms in here. I'm going to come down, my cameraman come in a bit closer. So there were lots of worms in that compost. They're all native worms, and of course they're the things we can see, but of course it's all the invisible ones, the bacteria, the fungi, the protozoa, and all the beneficial nematodes that are inside this compost that are the big benefits. And not only do I use it in my garden bed, but I also make compost tea from it, but that will be another video. So that's all ready now. Now I'm going to go and I'll be planting broccoli straight into that nice bed. I'm going to cover it with net because I have free-range chickens that will come and investigate this fresh dirt tomorrow, no doubt. Oh, I had a little frog there jumping out as well. So simple as simple. Now the rest of that compost I will leave open like that, and I'm going to put that in a shady area so all of the little microbes can breathe, and that's going to go under one of my trees, and when I'm ready for some more compost I will go and collect that and do exactly the same thing. Rather than a trench, I might dig it individual hole. So we've now got a kitten in the garden who's decided that she can come and have a look. Thanks for watching.